This console generation sucks. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I want to preface this by saying that I'm not talking about Nintendo here. They almost certainly have a new console coming up soon, and I kind of consider the Switch last generation, though they kind of fit this go-between. I'm mainly talking about Sony and Xbox with this video, because I think both companies and both platforms have severely underdelivered so far. Now, bear in mind, this generation isn't over yet, but like, good God. I think the biggest crippling flaw with this generation overall is the lack of variety and just flat out great games we're getting. PlayStation and Xbox have different problems to one another. PlayStation can still pump out great games. I love God of War, for instance. I've heard nothing but great things about Spider-Man 2. I may not care about The Last of Us, but a lot of people do. Chances are, when Sony puts out a first-party game, it's going to be pretty dang good, and I loved Final Fantasy XVI, 7 Rebirth, and Stellar Blade.
But Jmulls, those aren't technically first-party.
Okay, yeah. You know what I mean, though. We're talking about exclusives. And I'm not talking about exclusives as a concept. I've talked about how I don't like exclusives before. I'm focusing on the quality of the games in this video. Because while Sony puts out good games, they don't put out the variety that they used to be well known for. In fact, one of the reasons I really kind of didn't mind this recent state of play is because of Astrobot. It harkened back to the PS1 and PS2 era of pure creativity that Sony was putting out there time and time again, where not every game needed to be some massive blockbuster. These games could just be fun and interesting by themselves. And I think the best representation of the bad of this console generation for both sides of the aisle here with Xbox and PlayStation, funnily enough, is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Now, I'm sure that game is amazing, because I really enjoyed even the PS4 Ratchet and Clank. I love Ratchet and Clank, and while I haven't played Rift Apart personally, all the info coming out about it is that it didn't make all that much money. And yeah, who remembers the marketing for Rift Apart? It made the game look amazing, but it's Ratchet and Clank. I think it's clear that the game was over-budgeted for the amount of people likely to want to play a Ratchet and Clank game. That is an IP that shouldn't be utilized as a console seller or the new goalpost for graphics and loading times. Ratchet and Clank is really simple but fun, and dumb fun at that. The whole bunch of different weapons and platforming. Let Ratchet and Clank simply be Ratchet and Clank, and don't pour in so much money on a bunch of aspects that 80 if not 90% of the player base aren't going to particularly care about if the core Ratchet and Clank experience is compromised in any way. I don't think it was, but again, if you didn't have these insane loading times and a mechanic designed specifically for them, alongside all the crowd density or how well animated the fur was, if you didn't have these aspects be as fleshed out as they are, I don't think Ratchet and Clank would have been received less. Because the reason, at least I, and maybe I can only speak for myself here, the reason I would want to play a Ratchet and Clank game is for the Ratchet and Clank gameplay and the overall feel of it. I'm not going into it to try and stress test my PS5 or let alone my PC now that it's been ported. We'll get to that. And it feels as if both PlayStation and Xbox with this generation have largely, not entirely so, but largely kicked that entire mid-core or like AA and single-A experience to third-party. And since Xbox can't even nail its first-party games that well compared to Sony, we have seen PlayStation take far more of a market share compared to Xbox in this generation. But if you look even one generation back, well, the PS5's not keeping up with what the PS4 was doing, at least to my knowledge. Whereas even in the PS4 era, we had a whole bunch of really fun and interesting games that came out for a whole bunch of different IP. The PS5 largely is just focusing on iterating on those IPs and focusing on the really successful ones and disregarding the others, even if they're successful like Bloodborne. And I think it's a crying shame because it makes PlayStation on the whole far less desirable than it was in any other generation of it. Not every game is going to sell 5 million plus copies. It's just not going to happen. And believing every first-party title should be designed with that budget that it has to, and if it doesn't, it's not a success, in my opinion, is foolish. you're not doing yourself any real tangible favors. Instead of feeling like the breeding ground of innovation and interesting ideas for gameplay mechanics, it just feels recycled and rehashed with nothing new on the table. Xbox has been so focused on the Game Pass and acquiring IP and studios that we just still have not seen all of that effort manifest into really great, well-received games. And its latest game release, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, has been derided for being way shorter than people thought it would be, and for the gameplay being extremely one-dimensional and simple and not all that interesting. I barely made it through 50 minutes of that game. Having a long-term strategy is all well and good, but eventually that long-term strategy has to start to come into fruition, and we have to start seeing the fruits of that labor, and we just haven't really. Instead, we've had stinkers like Redfall, and games that had so much hype behind them like Starfield, be received moderately okay, or just look boring to a lot of people, myself included. There's a lot of different elements to this generation that we can point the finger and say there's some blame here. 100% absolutely, and I'm going to talk about so many games focusing on 30 FPS in a bit, but I will always defer that the bigger issue underlying every notion here is that the games are either too few in number, too similar to one another, or just lacking full stop. Halo has been MIA since Halo Infinite came out, as they've devolved that IP into a live service, and they've talked about new projects coming down the pipeline, and maybe we hear about that at the upcoming Xbox showcase, in which case, I'll be happy if this ages poorly. But IP and series for both PlayStation and Xbox that used to have regular releases that could get us hyped up for these games, anticipating them, looking forward to something every couple of years or so. Now it's just a case where if you don't like every IP these companies are putting out, then you just feel forgotten and ignored. Is it any wonder why PC is doing so well nowadays, as well as Nintendo? The console scene is largely stalling and not growing, as even Phil Spencer has admitted so. We've seen Xbox double down on PC years ago, and we're starting to see Sony invest and dip their toe in the water on PC. I won't be surprised if Sony is completely just working on a PC launcher full stop. It would explain why they are now starting to require all their games going forward to require a PlayStation Network account, why they are making a, oh god, what's it called? An overlay for their games on PC as well, because they realize the console market is largely stalling and not growing, so they need or want to find some new way to get money, and PC's an in that regard. But neither fully understand the intricacies of PC gaming and what PC gamers want, and while it leaves a lot of the PC marketplace to soak up a lot of the good games, which as a PC gamer myself, I'm completely happy to do so, it leaves these companies in an awkward middle ground to where they just don't bring the hype that they used to. No, seriously, when you really think about it, when was the last time you were fully, completely enthralled or hyped with one of these showcases that either PlayStation or Xbox have done? And I'm not just talking about, yeah, there's a couple good games here. Oh, I'm really looking forward to this one game. No, I'm talking about the level of hype we used to feel in E3 season back in the day. Granted, those were hit and miss, but when they hit though, oh, when they hit. You can argue it's because they're spreading it out throughout the year and doing multiple showcases, but even if they combined a lot of these showcases into one big show, would you be any more hype for them? Not really on my part. A couple of games look okay, but nothing that blows me away. The games I've been really enthralled by over the last couple of years have been third-party, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate, a couple of PlayStation exclusives like Final Fantasy and Stellar Blade, but now Square Enix is going fully multi-platform, so there you go. I think these companies have an issue where they keep focusing in on chasing trends from multiple years ago. Sony saw how popular their cinematic adventure games got with the PS4 era, and even parts of the PS3 era, you can argue. And they've just doubled down on that, but they've tried to make every single game a massive blockbuster AAA experience. And the whole host of people that just want a good game to play have kind of been just ignored and forgotten about. It's not like these titles don't sell well. It's just, what did the PS5 era bring new to the table? Same with the Xbox Series X, outside of like Game Pass and and PS Plus, whatever. Oh cool, the biggest innovation of this console generation is not necessarily a bunch of amazing, high-quality games, it's the idea we may never own games again. Oh, happiness and joy swells and overfills my heart. You combine the elements that they're not putting out consistently fun and amazing games. The variety is not there. They're over-focused on these massive, big-budget games, where a few of them barely even feel like games, and would be better suited as like a movie or something. Combine that with game prices moving up to $70 on the whole, at least way more often. All the while, even games that appeal to a smaller audience are being overdeveloped and trying to be forcefully thrown into the spotlight of AAA, and when they inevitably cannot hold up against that pressure, that game and that idea is put to shame instead of the bad ideas that went into its actual development. And there's far too much of a focus, in my opinion, on graphical fidelity, or just cramming in as many calculations and just things on the screen as humanly possible, instead of focusing on satisfying gameplay loops, innovative mechanics, and high performance like 60 FPS. Remember when the PS5 marketed itself as an 8K console? And one of the biggest hype pieces going into this generation for both Xbox and PlayStation was 60 FPS? How many games have come out to where they struggle with 60 FPS? Or just straight up don't have it as an option? People on the whole aren't going to ignore a good game simply because it's 30 FPS, especially in the console market, but it's a symptom of a larger problem. These games are focusing on the show instead of the substance. It's like a high-class, fancy dinner that focuses on the aesthetics of the food instead of the flavor. Or these games are jam-packed with a bunch of filler instead of the actual substance you really care about, to where it bloats and dilutes the entire experience. A lack of focus, a lack of originality, and a desperate attempt to siphon off as much money for each of these games as humanly possible. Look at how many live service games Sony had to close because they realized they were chasing trends from years ago that were no longer exactly applicable in the modern day, because the video games industry shifts and pivots at a moment's notice. And when you focus all of these games to be absolutely massive in scope, they take a long time to make. And when you also make these games to chase a trend, but they're not going to come out for 4 to 5 years, chances are you're going to miss the train on this boat. That didn't make sense, but you know what I mean. They're going to miss the hype. They just constructed a battleship for a war that ended 2 years ago. And if the games were good enough, a lot of these issues could be pushed under the rug, or at least buoyed by the idea that these games are amazing, but Sony doesn't put them out enough. And Xbox is still trying to figure out what a good game is. All the while, it feels as if Xbox and Sony, or PlayStation, are far more focused on everything but the games themselves, to the detriment of the consumer. PlayStation VR, the PlayStation Portal, Xbox just acquiring all these studios, and we have yet to see, really, the fruits of that labor manifest in a bunch of amazing games coming out consistently, constantly hyping up Game Pass. These things wouldn't be that bad if the games were there to back them up, but they simply aren't. All the while, Nintendo is able to put out a bunch of games that a lot of people care about on a console that is as easy to play as you can possibly imagine. Whether you want to be on the go or at home, the Switch enables that behavior. And for more traditional gaming, yeah, the PS5 and Xbox Series X were powerful for the price point when at launch, but now we're seeing budget PCs encroach on that price point. We're seeing a lot of myths that people en masse, especially in the console market, used to have for PC, no longer really apply and be dissuaded. And as always, we've seen the rise of the mobile scene as well. And now it feels as if for the next generation of consoles, both Sony and Microsoft are going to be desperately chasing the success of the Switch. PlayStation already to a degree with Portal, and that's not nearly comparable to the Switch, or even a Steam Deck. And Xbox has all but directly said that they're going to have a hybrid thing, all the while focusing on cloud streaming and all that. And it's another example where maybe this can end up well for them, but if they don't have the games, people en masse aren't going to care all that much, I think. But it's also another example of them just being behind the times. I think in a lot of ways, the Xbox Series generation and the PlayStation 5 generation represents kind of the end of the traditional console. Maybe they have one left in the tank. Maybe Xbox doesn't double down on becoming a hybrid generation with the next generation as much as we may think they are. Maybe Sony instead tries to bring back the Vita instead of just iterating on the Portal. Whatever. But it feels as if the future for console generations is going hybrid, having appealing hardware that makes it easy to game in whatever situation you may find yourself in. Because at the end of the day, people just want to be able to play games, and we all have our own different circumstances. Enabling people to be able to play games, the games they want, however they want, that is extremely attractive in the modern day. None of it will be rectified completely without amazing games. Xbox and PlayStation both have the IP. They can also just come up with new IP. But we've seen them stumble and fall time and time again. I could easily have turned this video into me preaching about PC gaming, because I am a PC gamer. I think it's the best platform right now. But competition is important, and I just want great games. And it just feels as if Microsoft and Sony have been so out of touch lately. I just wanted to focus on that with this video. But I feel like if I go on any longer, I'll just end up repeating myself or moving away from the topic at hand. So I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on this console generation, because at the end of the day, these aren't just my opinions. These aren't just my feelings. Let me know how you feel. Though I'm pretty sure the numbers don't lie, at least from the numbers we've seen before. So with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Maybe, hopefully, this video could age like milk after, Summer Game Fest and the Xbox Game Showcase. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Stay safe, have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!